Welcome to Out is Through, a podcast about living a meaningful life in difficult times. I'm Larry Lariosa, and I'm a life coach and licensed marriage and family therapist. In these uncertain times, maintaining a sense of well-being and purpose feels more challenging, yet more important than ever. In this podcast, I'll feature guests who have used their life experience, passion, and creativity to find personal meaning and deeper connection. As the saying goes, the only way out is through. And I hope these conversations help inspire you to live life to its fullest. So thanks for tuning in and enjoy the episode. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Out is Through, a podcast about living a meaningful life in difficult times. My name is Larry Lariosa, your host, and I know it's been a while since our last podcast. I was away on vacation traveling in southern Spain for about a month, came back, and really had to take my time adjusting to normal life and being back at work and in my routine. But here I am, and I'm excited to bring you another episode with an amazing guest. Dr. Felicia de la Garza Mercer is a second-generation Tejana clinical psychologist and practitioner of Mesoamerican-based healing traditions. She lives on the native lands of the Tonkawa, Comanche, Lipan Apache, and Coahuiltecan, currently known as Austin, Texas. She received her BA in psychology from Brown University, her Ph.D. from UCLA, and her postdoc from UC Berkeley. Her work brings together 20 years of psychological practice and training with ancestral, intuitive, and earth-centered approaches to support deep emotional and spiritual connection. Her private practice focuses on helping culturally diverse and neurodiverse high achievers develop trust and connection. Her practice is informed by a decolonizing approach to psychology that honors cultural identity and ancestral knowledge. Felicia also offers Curanderismo services at Xochimetzli Healing Arts, a separate, non-psychological spiritual practice. All right. Well, I'd like to welcome to the podcast Dr. Felicia de la Garza Mercer.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you.
I'm so excited to have you here, and I wanted to have you on for a couple of reasons. One is just because I wanted to reconnect with you.
Yeah.
So full disclosure, Felicia and I used to work together at a student health organization, and we were both therapists there. We just also have a lot in common around our perspective around the clinical work as therapists, which I want to get into, and this idea of decolonizing, which most of you on the podcast know that I made a film about decolonizing and the impact of colonialism on Filipino Americans. And I'm still very much on that journey personally, but also professionally, because as we know, mental health and getting trained as a mental health professional here in the US is through a colonial lens, and I've had to unlearn a lot and learn a lot. And I'm currently looking for ways to weave in some of the indigenous practices of the Philippines, my ancestral land, into mental health therapy with clients who are Western as well,
Yeah.
many of whom are Filipino American or people of color. But so I thought it would be a really good just discussion partly for selfish reasons to brainstorm with you, but also this bigger question about healing and what it means. And excuse me.
I was remembering how this, like when we first started working together, it was around 15 years ago or so. And I'm remembering that you were getting training in EMDR. And around that time, even then people thought that was woo-woo. And it wasn't until like after the research came, and now it's like this evidence-based method. right? So even in that, I was thinking about how these things evolve and how they're seen, and like the Western world has to have this evidence-based model.
Totally. And for those of you who don't know EMDR, which I am now certified in, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I might have another separate podcast about that, but it is a evidence-based practice for trauma. But what is it? It's tapping. Where does tapping start from? Tapping starts from drumming, which is an
Mm-hmm.
indigenous practice for so many populations that
Mm-hmm.
has never been sort of legitimized
Yeah.
until really Francine Shapiro, psychologist, but a white woman, um,
Mm-hmm.
kind of coined this evidence-based practice, and now it's legit when this has
Mm-hmm.
been done for,
Yeah.
I
The
mean, some
bilateral
version.
stimulation. Yeah.
Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So I was saying before I had my cough attack, part of the reason why I wanted to have you here is just to broaden the conversation about healing and what that looks for different groups, particularly, for Latinx folks, a group that I think is really kind of vulnerable right now with everything
Of
happening in the
course. Yeah.
administration.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just want to hear about your journey and also kind of pick your brain just about healing in general. So, I always start this podcast with just a general question because this is out as through living through difficult times and getting through difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing in our current world?
It's so much, right? I feel like it definitely takes up a lot of energetic space and mental space, and just having to get up, especially like living in Texas and seeing ice down the street out in front of, an elementary school or an apartment building. It's really, really like hurts my heart. And at the same time, right, like still creating space for joy, for healing, for community. So living here in Austin is a little bit of a different vibe, but definitely I see like reconnecting to roots, coming together as a way of kind of working against that. But it's so heavy. It's so heavy,
Yeah.
particularly earlier this year. It's hard to just go online and look at everything happening day to day, or much less just like witnessing our earth.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many layers to it. I was sharing with you before that I think a lot about you and and having young kids in this current state, and just also being a parent must have its challenges, just explaining to your kids what's happening right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're old enough to understand. My children went to a bilingual dual language school. Like there were groups that would come and be there to protect kids as they were going in and out of the school. Like, definitely had to create plans around what to do if ICE was spotted around the neighborhood, and we're all citizens.
Yeah.
So it's just
Mm.
like, even just the privilege in that, and knowing how dramatically different it is for undocumented folks. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. We're all sort of impacted by it in different ways and in similar ways, and I'm thinking about you, I'm thinking about your kids, and glad to hear that you personally are getting a lot of out of what you're doing with your work. And we'll kind of, maybe that's a good segue into you. And can you just share a little bit about your story? Where did you grow up, and how do you think your early story shaped you to where you are as a healer?
hmm No, that's a really good question. Okay, so yeah, we're going way back. So I was born and raised here in Austin, and my mother is from Laredo. My father is from town outside Dallas. So, and my abuela was from Mexico. We were primarily connected to my mother's relatives, and so I have a lot of memories of going down to Laredo, being immersed in Latinidad. And I also grew up a little confused about my cultural identity because, like I mentioned, we weren't that connected to my father's family. And my father spoke fluent Spanish. He played the accordion and keyboards in Chicano bands. He played soccer. So it wasn't until I was older I was like, oh, he's white. And like, and so, because like it was all just like, especially here in Texas, like there's so much intermingling. And so a piece of that too has been like this unfolding of my own cultural identity over time
Mm.
and being in feeling very much in between in a lot of spaces, but primarily feeling comfortable in Latin American, Mexican American spaces. So growing up Chicana, the culture, the emphasis on spirituality is embedded in our daily lives. So having altars, being connected to spirit.
Mm.
I grew up where you'd put a glass of water by the side of your bed to help you if you were having nightmares. Like, little things like that that were just a part of everyday life, but that I quickly also saw was not necessarily a part of the everyday lives of my, predominantly white classmates. So I grew up here, went to a really rigorous high school. I went to Brown for college. Again, complete culture shock being a kid, like Chicana kid from middle class Texas, suddenly going up to Rhode Island. And I knew I wanted to be a psychologist since I was a kid. I read
Mm.
like a psychology textbook one day because my mom was a teacher, and I was like, this is fascinating. So very
Mm.
much just like jumped into that in college. Really had no idea what I was doing. Applied to grad school, went to a PhD program in clinical psychology at UCLA, which was a very science focused program. It was, of course, like we were trained as clinicians, but very much evidence based, science based. And then went on to do additional clinical work at UCLA, UC Berkeley, worked with you, and came back to Texas because I really wanted to start my own private practice.
I'm personally resonating with your story and that idea of place and belonging
Hmm.
and being kind of stuck in two worlds
Yeah.
that I think is so similar in the experience of a lot of kids of immigrant parents, first gen folks. And it's interesting because I think about my own journey to being a therapist and other people I know whose journey to being a therapist. So much of it is to kind of study humans because we're trying to figure it out
Hmm.
in this confusing world that we're trying to navigate. And I just know, being from immigrant parents, growing up
Hmm.
like basically 10 minutes away from the Mexican border in a
Yeah.
very Mexican and Filipino community, but then also on TV watching a completely different America
Hmm.
play out. It's
Hmm.
like, what is happening and how do I
Yeah.
find my place? And
Hmm.
I'm hearing that. I wonder, for you, can you say more about like the path to where did decolonizing psychology and that kind of mindset begin for you?
So it definitely has like been an unfolding over time. I mean, in the psychology world, the name of like decolonizing psychology has been something I think just within the past decade as more and more people of color become therapists, especially, and start challenging some of what's called the gold standard, obviously, right? And in therapy. So as I created my private practice here in Austin, I very intentionally connected to other communities of therapists of color. And that was so empowering just to be around so many more people who look similar to you, going out and doing the work and encountering some of the same issues of like this sort of treatment is not necessarily applicable for all folks, right?
Mhm.
So that was definitely a piece of it, and just having more freedom within a private practice versus working for an institution, of course. And it was specifically, however, deepened for me around like 6 or 7 years ago when I started studying curanderismo, the Mexican curanderismo, which is basically like a traditional healing folk practices that are more indigenous to Mexico. So would you like me? Maybe I could talk a little bit
Yeah,
more
please
about
tell us,
Curanderismo.
please. Yeah,
Um,
that would be great.
so it's sometimes it's difficult to explain, like if you didn't grow up within like a Mexican or like Chicano culture. But oftentimes, like if you grew up Chicano, you remember like an abuela or a tia or your mom kind of using an egg, passing it over your body to absorb negative energy, the use of different herbs. And all of these things are sort of like passed down through the lineages of the Mexican ancestry. But in its core, curanderismo is about returning to spirit. In curanderismo, the spirit, the physical body, and the earth, all of the elements, they are all one. And so in curanderismo, we believe that you can't just isolate and look at the physical body or like even just like the cognitive mental health, because it's all intertwined. And then it's also connected to our spiritual health. It's connected to our ancestry, what are different intergenerational traumas that have been passed on. So it's really a very holistic way of looking at a person and responding to them.
I just want to reflect on the beauty of the pre-colonial way of healing that as
Hmm.
I'm hearing you, it's so in line with a lot of indigenous Philippine culture. We have the same colonizer, the Spanish.
Yeah.
And so but these practices that if you look at like the colonized
Hmm.
result under a layer of Catholicism, like it's
Hmm.
still there. Like we could so
Yeah.
see it. Like in the Philippines,
Hmm.
we have a lot of similar rituals and omens, and we have our
Hmm.
babaylan and our healers, and so a lot of
Hmm.
it is similar. And
So
how
different kinds of shamanism, yeah.
exactly, and how
Hmm.
wonderful that whenever I think of colonization, it has such a negative connotation, and I look at colonization as a form of trauma,
For
and
sure. For sure.
how awesome and resilient our ancestors were that they found a way to keep these practices alive in the context of Catholicism.
Hmm.
Um, right? Because as I talk about, and obviously growing up near Mexico and growing up Filipino, everything you're talking about sounds like stuff I know. Like I have
Hmm.
imagery of
Hmm.
that, and I didn't really have a vocabulary for it, and I just thought that was just Catholicism. But as I grew up and learned more about like Western
Hmm.
Catholicism, I'm like, oh, most people don't do these things, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, there's just a beauty to it, and
Hmm.
I was really struck with some of your videos on Instagram, and
Hmm.
have links to that where you kind of show some of these practices. And I was thinking maybe you can talk about that. So,
Hmm.
Olympia was
Yes.
a
Uh-huh.
practice. Can you share a little bit about what that is? And
Yeah, so okay, Olympia, it literally in English it means it's a spiritual cleanse. And so if you come to see a curandero curandera, oftentimes you'll receive Olympia, and Olympia is usually performed with an egg, herbs, sometimes alcohol, copal, different incense. Really, the magic and the beauty of curanderismo is that you can just use what's at hand. You go outside and find some different herbs. You can use a lemon, you can use a lime, right? All these different objects that we view as having their own living essence and asking their permission to absorb the negative energy that might be stuck in different parts of our body. So, in many ways, Olympia is can be a really beautiful ceremony because when I conduct Olympia for a client, first we sit down and we have what's called a plática, like a heart-centered conversation, which, as an aside, is essentially therapy.
yeah,
But indigenous Mexicans were using for hundreds of years. And then what is shared in the plática informs how you might approach the limpia. So before limpia, I always say prayers to the Great Spirit, to my ancestors and guides, to the ancestors and guides of my client. And then I'll have an altar set up with some offerings. And then I'll typically use an egg, and you pass that over the body front and back. Then I like to use herbs, and I have a really lush herb garden right now because we've had so many rains here in Texas. So I'll bring in some herbs from my garden. I'll oftentimes use the incense of copal, which we believe is a just direct communicator to the spirit world. It's thought to activate like your third eye and crown chakras as well. And all of these are just like different mediums for spirit to come through. And in the limpia as well, oftentimes like it's so helpful to come in with an intention for the limpia. What is it we want to let go of? And what is it we want to call in? As well as just removing all the different negative stagnant energy that can belong to the person themselves or just to people around that person.
That's so wonderful because it's getting to that part of spirit and body, but really spirit. And I mean, one thing I kind of notice in my practice, and I'm sure you see it as well, is like more than anything, broken spirit, like a fragmentation of spirit that traditional Western mental health, I don't feel like really gets to.
Yeah.
How did you learn how to do this, Olympia?
Well, I grew up with them.
Okay.
From my mother, and my abuela was also a spiritual worker in Laredo.
Okay.
So I feel like, this medicina has been passed down. So I had grown up with my own knowledge. Even as a child, I was a very deeply spiritual person. I felt very connected to the spiritual world, the unseen. I had very powerful and prophetic dreams. But as I grew older, I learned like, oh, like people don't talk about these things, right?
Yeah.
And I very much entered the academic, head-driven world. So it was later on in my late 30s that I started reconnecting to my roots. And I really feel like reconnecting to roots, re-indigenizing is such an important part of healing for so many people of color because it is us. It's everything. It's not even like roots can be people, of course, like our ancestors. But within Curanderismo, we also see plants, the earth, as ancestors as well. Like maize, corn is an ancestor, right? Because that is just embedded in our DNA as, Mexican Americans. So it's really so beautiful. I feel like I've gotten off a little bit. But so starting around 6-7 years ago, I very intentionally started seeking mentorship, classes, began reading up on curanderismo, and over time was really able to develop a very beautiful community here in Austin of other Mexican descendants, therapists, healers, massage therapists, like, people who just like, there's a collective urge right now, I think, across a lot of different cultures to come back to the earth, especially given, all the AI, all the technology. It's like, we're all so fed up with it.
Yeah.
So over the years, just meeting different mentors, maestros, maestras, learning from them, and also learning what my own medicine is as well. It's like it might not look exactly how, one maestro might do it, but like, what does it look like for me? What are my gifts to bring in the healing process?
Yeah, and something you said, because I think we are in this period of trying to heal, but particularly people of color. And so much of our experience has been about disconnecting. And what you're saying is the medicine is actually reconnecting.
Yes.
And I think we're all feeling that pull. And I would venture to even just say, like, white people have an indigenous history too. Like, I
Yes.
encourage them to look at
Yes, for
their
sure.
healing practices because we're all just so disconnected. And one thing I love as I hear you talking about this is just the reconnection to it all, and that we
Yeah.
don't, like, AI is like one side of the pendulum, and we want, for many of us, we're craving to swing on the other end because
Mhm.
that's so disconnected, and we can
Mhm.
feel it like in our bodies and just
Yeah.
navigating the world.
Mhm. For sure. Even I bring up spirituality with all clients on some level because I remind them like connecting to your spirit does not necessarily have to be like a God or anything like that. It's just whatever connects you
Mhm.
to yourself, to the spirit inside. And I think when it's put that way, people often realize it's like, oh, I don't even know. Right. So I think there can be a beautiful exploration there, just for what it means as a person, but it is also a pathway to connect to one's roots, whatever they might be, you
Yeah.
know?
Let's take a break and return to our conversation with Dr. Felicia de la Garza Mercer.
Hola a todos. Happy Wednesday. I am going to be giving Olympia soon, and so I thought I would just share a little bit of the tools, the things that I incorporate into Olympia to demystify it a little bit for someone who's never had Olympia before. The foundation of what I do is based upon creating an altar, first and foremost, and so I spend time putting energy into that before my client even arrives. I like to include an offering for the ancestors and guides that are coming through today. The food is a way of showing respect. It is also a way of giving energy to the spirits for them to come through and give guidance during a session. After I say the prayers and I call on the directions, I like to start with an egg. I will use some agua florida to spritz the egg and ask the egg's permission to use it during Olympia. After the egg, I will incorporate some herbs. So these are some herbs that I brought from my garden. There is some hierbabuena, Mexican oregano, a bunch of basil, a little bit of rue, and I'm pretty sure there is some bee balm in there at some place, but I also like to incorporate a rattle or semajas in Spanish, and also the drum. The drum is like the heartbeat. I like to use the drum as a way to open up and create a column of energy in the body. Like you can think of it as the chakras, or in Nahuatl it's cuecueos. But the drum just creates a really nice vibrational energy as well. And then I'll usually end with some copal. In a different space, I might use the briquettes and some chunks of resin, but since I'm in an office here, I'm using like a nice copal incense that I got in Mexico recently. So that's about it. After the Olympia, we have some time to just process the experience, discuss what came up, talk about next steps, other sort of practices that you can do outside of the session to fortify yourself, to continue the healing process. And sometimes, if it feels right to do so, I'll incorporate some tarot or ancestral communication into the session. So just wanted to show you a little snapshot.
That was the voice of Dr. Felicia de la Garza Mercer from a video on her Instagram channel. Now, let's return to the interview. Can you share a little bit about braiding and why that's important?
Okay, yes. So braiding is very important in a lot of indigenous cultures. And the three parts of the braid are symbolic. I'm not wearing them now, but I'm of course just touching my hair. um, and so each part of the braid, one represents mind, the other represents body, and the other represents spirit, and showing how those three can become one. So braids or trenzas in Spanish are viewed as a way of like protection. It's obviously viewed as a connection to indigenous roots. Oftentimes they're even a form of resistance
Mm,
because back in the day, indigenous Americans weren't even allowed to wear their braids or they'd be cut off. And so wearing them is a sign of pride and connection. And within curanderismo, when you're practicing, it's thought that like people's energy, it can jump, right? And so especially since you're removing any kind of like negative, heavy energy from someone else, we protect ourselves while we're working. So one of the ways to do that is to braid your hair because it kind of keeps it away. The braid in and of itself is a protection. But also the ancient Mexica, what we would know as the Aztec today, they believed that what's called tonali, or
mm,
our spirit, lived and came from the crown of our head, and so was very strong around our hair. Our hair was seen as a form of protection. So you know how babies have a soft spot?
yeah.
The Mexica believed that that is where the tonali would enter. And it's interesting, right? Because this is also what we would, more Eastern beliefs would believe is like the crown chakra,
Yeah.
right? And so I think even in that, there's so much intention, there's so much meaning in everything in Curanderismo. I wear obsidian because it's considered a very sacred, protective stone in the for the Mexica. The jewelry you wear, the clothing you wear, all of it is inherently tied to your own self power. And I don't
Mhm.
mean power like in a power way, but right, but our like our spirit, our inner sense of power. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about it from both angles. There's our inner power, but then also when you said resistance and reclaiming
Mm-hmm.
something that was historically taken away, that's kind of been like a lot of people may not be aware of the history of braiding. And just to hear that and to reclaim that and to maybe use it in the form of like resistance now, I think is so
Mm-hmm.
important because not all power is political power. Power
Mm-hmm.
can be in your self-expression and how you
Mm-hmm.
carry yourself in the world
Authenticity, I think, is power.
exactly. Exactly. And I would imagine, and I always get this way when I am wearing like my barong,
Mm-hmm.
which is the shirt in the Philippines that
Mm-hmm.
a lot of men wear, that there's a story behind it that even just putting it on, and I imagine
Yeah.
just wearing the braids, like you carry yourself in a
Mm-hmm.
way that you wouldn't carry yourself wearing your regular like sweats or your
Yes.
like it's just
Yes.
different.
It truly is. And, you know, incorporating ganaderismo into my practice and then also just creating my own separate business that is purely spiritually focused, it required so much authenticity for me, so much self expression. And for a long time, I was very scared because, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to be fully me. What are people going to think? Or I'm a psychologist. I can't do that. But I had so many mentors who were like, why not? Ike, like what? Like what's gonna happen? Like this is you.
Mm,
And so after a number of experiences and then after a recent trip to Mexico, I came back and I was like, I just can't go back anymore. I This is who I am. And in order to do this work, it can be like energetically depleting. And I have to wear my protective garb. I want to wear the clothing of my culture, all of that as well. And to be have so much pride and connection to it. Like it is sort of like, well, so what?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, just to color that in a little bit for those of you who are listening that aren't therapists, I think that there has been traditionally this notion in Western therapy that we're
mhm.
blank slates,
Yes.
that, that we have no personalities. We're just these generic people that read like white men's theory
Mm-hmm.
from years ago that we just analyze a chair. And for people of color, that is oppressive. Like we are
Mm-hmm.
multi-dimensional people, and how much do we participate in our own oppression when we ascribe to what a lot of these how these classic schools have trained us? And I can relate to what you said about at first it is a little scary to show ourselves because we
Mm-hmm.
are, even as therapists, in the most vulnerable setting.
Mm-hmm.
We have been conditioned slash colonized to be and carry ourselves in a certain way.
Yes.
Obviously, we have to adhere to ethics and all of that,
And we're
but
taught that it's like the right way,
exactly.
exactly, and a part of that, like even just graduating from, your degree is based on doing it in this certain kind of way.
Mhm.
I remember at the place where we worked together, one time I was wearing these really long beaded
Mm.
earrings that had come from Mexico, and like a colleague commented on them and just sort of like laughed. And of course, like we won't dissect that whole thing, but just even having like reactions to that simply just to earrings, like it can affect you. You see immediately how you're being perceived
Mhm.
um and being different in whatever kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I remember that story. So, but and something else just as you're talking that I'm thinking about is that I think traditional Western talk psychology doesn't it's hard to talk through spirit,
Mhm.
right? It's
Mhm.
not something that we can really intellectualize, and I would imagine, especially I would imagine with other Latinx clients,
Mhm.
that sometimes it's not what you're not saying and what you're experiencing and feeling that is the
Mhm.
healing.
Yes, exactly. When it comes to spirituality, I think there's a lot of times people don't bring that to therapy. One, because it's not invited, and also people themselves tend to be like, "Well, I don't know. I experienced this, but people are going to think I'm crazy." So very on in becoming a therapist, I of course started working with many Latinx clients and really tried to create a safe space to be like, "Yeah, I believe you. You're talking about spirits, or like, your great grandfather waking you up in the middle of the night, or you know, um, wearing, your protective gear against malojo, like all of these different things. It's just like can be so nice to work with someone who just gets it and isn't, going to see that in like a diagnostic sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How have your clients, whether it's through your psychotherapy practice or whether it's through um curandera, how have people responded to your work?
It's been so positive, like my mentors are really right. Like, what was I scared about? Because also it's just more authentically me. It was more about me and just being authentic, to be honest, right? It was like it's so vulnerable just to put everything out there, especially like you're saying when we're taught to not really disclose at all. We're taught not necessarily not to bring our full selves. But it's been so beautiful because I think it has created all these pathways for clients to start exploring. And so sometimes Olympia might serve as a catalyst for connecting to spirit, to ancestors, giving someone more permission to explore their roots. A lot of times, too, if I'm working with someone who is at the beginning of like their spiritual journey, learning how to just create an altar. You can see one of my altars is right behind me, and an altar, especially in Curanderismo, is seen as sort of like the foundation of your work as well. So I've definitely just seen it being a catalyst for so many folks. It creates more room to talk about how mind, body, and spirit all come together. And also, I think it has helped people to better understand the difference between themselves and others. So in Curanderismo, we strongly believe that we take on other people's energies. Emotion is energy, right? So when we're starting to feel down or depressed or disconnected from ourselves or foggy, a lot of the times it's not our own energy. So I think it can also be a really interesting way in therapy to explore what is mine, what is me, and what is someone else, right? Like, oh, like this, I think is also connected to how intergenerational trauma occurs when what some generations, those different feelings or patterns that they're unable to process get passed down to the next generation. And so sometimes spiritually, I very much believe that we have to recognize, like, oh, this pattern is passed down to me. And it's my job to break that cycle. Like, actually, like, this is not even me. These emotions have been passed down, right? Or like these patriarchal colonized beliefs have been passed down. And like the liberation in doing that as well, I feel like is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely at least for me and a lot of my clients, it's a process. It's
Mm-hmm.
just this process of, because everything for many of us who grew up in the United States, everything we kind of learn about our histories is under a filter of past. Like that, at least that's how I grew up. A lot of that's the past. America is the way forward. This is how we're
Mm-hmm.
thinking. Um, your practices are sort of antiquated compared to modern medicine. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just not so much, you're not just being told that, but that's a mindset that is being passed on probably from generation to generation because
Mm-hmm.
of, you look at the histories of colonization and you just look at history in general, and we've been told that we're inferior, we're not good enough, and
Yeah,
sometimes we hold on to things that aren't ours. And
exactly.
yeah,
A lot of the time. A lot of the
yeah,
time.
yeah. Before we move on from curandera, is there anything else you wanted to say about your practice?
Well, curandera is a very powerful. I don't know, some of my friends might be like, "Oh, yes, like you can call yourself that," but I
Mm,
definitely consider myself more like a practitioner of curanderismo. I'm definitely always still learning. There's just so many different ways to connect to spirit, and one thing that I'll also share as how it relates to myself and how we all have our own different medicine or medicina as healers is that it can look different. There can be integration. So I do perform very traditional parts of curanderismo, like a plática, a limpia. I also will receive ancestral communication and pass that down, like different messages. I also grew up reading tarot.
mm,
So that's also a piece of what I do in my practice. And more as I study curanderismo, as I learn from elders, from maestros, maestras, everything is so interwoven in different ways. Like, for example, we were referencing the chakras earlier, but for the ancient Toltecs, they also had their versions of chakras. They weren't called chakras, they were called cuequeos. And they as well had 7 specific parts on the body that aligned to what existed in different Hindu and Buddhist beliefs as well. So it really is honoring the traditions that have been passed down, as well as acknowledging, at least for me in my work, like all the different parts of myself and how they show up.
I'm just hearing a lot of the kind of universality of a lot of this stuff with other
Yes,
indigenous
yeah.
cultures.
So it's all different. But like I work from with folks from all different backgrounds. Like of course, people who um have Mexican heritage or different Latin American heritage, they might have grown up with some of these beliefs. But inevitably it's still a connection to spirit. It's still calling on ancestors and spirit. And it might be this one pathway, but it can open up so many other pathways for someone else. And in being my authentic self, I really want to create space for people to do that as well, because to me, I think that authenticity piece, that being true to yourself, like it's a way of healing. I feel like through authenticity, we start learning how to love ourselves. Through
Hmm.
connecting to our roots, we learn how to love ourselves. So to me, it's all very much interwoven.
Yeah. Yeah, I find as I get older, that need to connect to the ancestral wisdom just gets more and more kind of intensified. And it's also very American to say, I am my own thing and I'm like, I
Hmm.
can do it on my own. And I think now that I am older, but also just in these times where we're in just this period of instability and uncertainty. I mean,
Yeah.
some can argue we're always in that, but we're in a
We're in a
particular
deep
version.
place of transformation in this world. Yeah.
Right, but also our ancestors have lived through it. Like, we're not the first to go through these transformational changes, and I think that wisdom and sometimes that wisdom isn't maybe a thought, but it's just an experience in our body is
Yeah.
enough to kinda carry us through.
Hmm.
I think the work you're doing is amazing. I wonder, as you because this is a podcast about happiness and living a fulfilled, meaningful life. How has your work given you a sense of meaning and belonging, connection with others?
Oh, it's everything. Like it is a part of every waking moment of my life. When I wake up, the first thing I do is like, I thank the Great Spirit for giving me another day, for giving my children another day. I say my prayers every morning at my altar. I speak to my guides. I feel them around me. I have a flourishing garden, which, again, like 7 years ago, I'd be like, me gardening, huh? But like now I have this, and just going outside, slowing down, like really, we are interconnected. If you really think about it and you're outside and it's like there's that tree and the birds, and it's all a reflection of us. There's this oneness. And so that's something I think a lot of the current administrations around the world, like they're just trying to rid us of that very natural connection to spirit. But I think if we all reclaim that,
Mhm.
it's so powerful. But yes, like, through my own training and development, it's become very easy for me to access that world. I can go into a trance very quickly and receive messages from spirit. I throughout my home, there's altars everywhere. Like everyone in my family, we all wear, protective bracelets and things like that. And so it's so beautiful and I think so life-giving, especially in these times where everything is so tumultuous.
Yeah, thank you for that. And a lot of what you're saying just continues to resonate. In Tagalog, we have a term kapwa, which is translates to self and other, which it's not just
Mm-hmm.
other people, but it's also the environment that
Yeah.
I am you, you are me, and it's a similar concept. And it's like the loss of kapwa or whatever we
Mm-hmm.
want to call it. That's why we're in the trouble we're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we've
Mm-hmm.
almost lost that connection. And so the best maybe medicine is to reclaim it. And I'm
Yeah.
hearing just that's a lot of what you give yourself and what you give your clients. Do you have any advice for anyone who may be interested in some of the practices you're talking about and connecting to their
Mm-hmm.
ancestral histories the way you did? Like,
Yeah.
does one start?
It's well, nowadays it's so much more prevalent. I feel like 10 years ago it was still kind of hiding a bit, and that's even just a part of our culture is like you don't talk about it, right?
Yeah.
But I think like collectively there's so much intentionality now around re-indigenizing and connecting to roots. I don't love social media, but going on social media and looking up different healers that are in the area where you live can be helpful. I mean, of course, you try to get recommendations. That's always a great place to start is just meeting with someone, starting with Olympia and having that experience yourself. Nowadays, there's also a lot of different retreats you can go on if you really want to like get started. But But honestly, all you have to do is go outside
Mm.
and start talking to Madre Tierra, to Padre Sol, to inviting, just even inviting, asking your ancestors, your guides to show up, to be present. Our ancestors, they are so excited to be involved in our lives and to be called upon. They're just like waiting oftentimes for like us to just be like, okay, I'm ready. And they're like, all right, So it's so simple as that, or just creating an altar. An altar is simple. You need just all the four elements: fire, water, air, earth. You set it up, you put some meaningful objects on your altar, and there you go. So in so many ways, it's so easy in that way just to start on your own, but then starting to broaden it, seeking teachers, mentors. There's a lot of books out there now, some good ones on curanderismo.
Great. Thank you for sharing that wisdom. And if folks were interested in seeing or meeting with you, where can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, you can go to my Instagram. It's at Dr. Felicia DM. I have my psychology practice, and then which is, me, my name. And then there's my other practice, Xochimetzli, which is my solely spiritual practice. I work with people in person and online. So even if someone's located across the world, I can work with them. Spirit comes through virtually as well. It may not include like a real life limpia, but there is a lot of space for healing there as well. I would love to folks to reach out, whether that's for therapy, where I integrate these components, or whether it's more strictly spiritual.
Great. And we'll have all of those links in the episode description box. Before we transition to the last question, is there
Mhm.
anything else you want to say about your work? Anything else you want to
I
put out there?
I just love what I do so much. Like in doing this, I feel fully whole and connected. And this spiritual part was a piece that I really needed, not just for myself, but in my practice as well, to feel whole and authentic. It's so energizing when we do what we love. And especially as healers, as therapists, to be a part of someone's healing journey is always so beautiful. And also, I just want to thank you for reaching out and having me on here because it's been so fun.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I learned a lot. And I'm also just inspired by your calling to be a more authentic, both a more authentic person, but also an authentic therapist. Like,
Hmm.
we are people, we're not blank slates, and we can't offer our true gifts if we are expected to be blank slates.
Hmm.
We do have natural gifts that call us to do this work, but also the cultural and the ancestral gifts that we're given that are meant to share with others. And so I just appreciate your courage and your strength and your wisdom.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And so our last question is a little bit of a fun question, which I shared with you ahead of time, and we'll get to see a little bit of that, all parts of you. Because my belief is music is a medium for connection, spirit,
Oh, music is life.
creativity.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the question is, you are stranded on a deserted island. You have 3 albums to listen to for the rest of
Hmm.
your life. I know. Um, what 3 albums would you bring with you?
This is such a hard question, Larry, because I love music so much. My father was a musician. I play music. I sing. Like, there's always music going on in my house. So narrowing it down to three was very difficult. But I sort of came up with some criteria for myself that helped me out with it. Like, one of them was that every single song on the album had to be great,
Mm,
right? Like, if I only get 3 albums, then there have to be albums where every single song
wow,
is a banger, right?
that's
Um,
tough.
I know. And so then my second criteria was that I have to be able to dance to it because I love dancing. And if I'm going to be stuck alone on an island by myself, I have to dance and have music to keep me sane. So, okay, so so when I bring up these albums, they're not necessarily albums I listen to all the time, but for me, I'm like they meet these criteria. They're full of
Hmm.
bangers. I can dance to them. So my first one is the Pretenders' first album, self-titled, The
Oh,
Pretenders.
is that
Hmm.
Learning to Crawl? No,
No, it's just
The
called
Pretenders
The Pretenders. It's
with
their first
Brass and
album.
Pocket. Is
Yes.
Brass and Pocket on that? Oh,
Yes. Uh-huh. But if you go back and listen to that album, every song is so good. It's their best
wow.
album. And so I've always been a fan of Chrissy Hine.
Mhm.
And something I realized when I was going through these albums was I was like, oh, every one of these albums is like a fusion of different types of music. So with the Pretenders, it's like rock, punk, like this 80s, right? It came out in 1980, so it was on the cusp of all this stuff.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I think that album's awesome. I don't know if you like the Pretenders.
I love the Pretenders. I don't know their
Uh-huh.
individual albums. I know
Uh-huh.
they're like I mean, obviously like Brass and Pocket and
Hmm.
Middle of the Road and
Yeah.
um Back on the Chain Gang, but I'm gonna check out that album. I thought I had
Hmm.
it at one point, but I didn't listen. I don't know if I've been exposed or appreciated the way that you've described it. So I'm gonna give that
Well,
a listen.
when I was a kid, all we had was a record player and we had that on LP. So, you learn to listen to the album in its entirety versus how it is now.
Yeah.
Okay, so my second one is Los Lobos' How Will the Wolf Survive? For those who don't know, they're like a Chicano band from East LA. And I mean, they're still performing and
Mm.
making music, even though they started coming out in the 70s. And their music is a mix of rock, of like different Chicano, Mexicano sounds, really just a fusion, beautiful voices. Like they're one of my favorite bands of all time, and I've probably seen them the most
Uh-huh.
out of all the bands I've seen. So How Will the Wolf Survive was one of like their big breakout
Okay.
albums. And again, every single song on there is a banger.
Okay. I will have to check that out. And such a good fusion of when you were describing it, it was like, oh, that's the integration you're talking about. It's like it just sounds like
Hmm.
all parts of you.
Yeah, I grew up listening to them. It was hard because I was like, well, anyway, there's a lot of other artists I would have loved to include in this list. But and then my last one, have you heard of Jorge Ben from Brazil?
No.
So he was one of the first like Tropicalia musicians, along with like Caetano del Oso and Gilberto Gil. I don't speak
Okay.
Portuguese, so I'm probably butchering all this, but he has this album called Africa Brasil, um,
Huh.
and it came out in like mid 70s.
Okay.
And so it's this really awesome album, very upbeat. Like I said, I had to dance to all the albums. And it's when he started fusing Tropicalia with rock, with different like African beats and sounds, funk. So it's a really fun album too.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. I have a weakness for Brazilian music.
Hmm.
Definitely like bossa novas, and
Hmm.
every
Yeah.
fusion that comes out of that.
Yes.
Well, all good choices. The ones I'm not familiar with, I'm gonna check
Uh-huh.
out. And
Yeah.
they just, as you were describing them, they seem just so holistic and full of good spirit. So I will definitely check that
Yeah. You
out.
should. You'll like them. You'll like
Yes.
them.
Thank you so much for doing this and
Oh,
sharing
thank
your
you.
wisdom and your passion with us. And it sounds like you're doing great work over there in Austin and like abroad and wherever
Hmm.
you're doing services. And I just, yeah, we're in a moment and we all do we all have a part of being part of the healing. And it just sounds like
Hmm.
you found yours. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing that with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been so good to reconnect with you too.
To find out more about Felicia, you can go to her website at feliciadmercerphd.com or xochimetzlihealingarts.com, or you can find her on Instagram at Dr. Felicia DM, and all of these links will be in the episode description box. Such a great conversation with Felicia. and one that reminds me of the importance of healing and connecting to our ancestors. I hear so many similarities in Felicia's journey and my own. Perhaps there are parts of this interview that you resonate with. This interview reminds us that spirit and connection, or reconnection, doesn't have to be this large existential concept. All these things can be accessible if one makes the time, space, and heart for it. I hope there is something you can take away from today's conversation as we continue to navigate these uncertain times together. Thanks again for listening to Out is Through. Until next time. The views expressed by the speakers are their own, and their appearance on the podcast does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Out is Through is a podcast for entertainment and educational purposes only. It's not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are in need of support, please seek out a licensed mental health professional in your area.